distinguished colleagues, Mr. President, I seek your indulgence to allow me to lead this debate on this very vital national issue of power rotation, especially as it seeks to allay the fears of minority groups, especially in the states, to access power and contribute their quota to the development of our country. Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this bill was mentioned and read for the first time in this very revered chamber on Tuesday, 26 July 2022. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, the one and sole intent of this bill is to enact a legislation that will seek to amend the provisions of the Constitution to provide for the rotation of power among the geopolitical zones, governorship among the senatorial districts and federal constituencies in general elections in Nigeria. This bill has become imperative considering the controversies trailing the nomination of persons for elections into various offices, especially the offices of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and governors of various states of the Federal Republic. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me humbly remind us that in our nation's constitution, there is what is called the federal character principle, which requires the fair and equitable representation of different ethnic and regional groups in the composition of all tiers of government. This was designed by the framers of the Constitution to ensure that there is no predominance of persons from a few states or a few ethnic groups or sectional groups in running the affairs of the country. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, one of our duties as legislators is to protect the Constitution of our dear country, Nigeria. And one way to do that is to support this bill because power rotation is a necessary lubricant that oils the federal character principle as enshrined in the Constitution. Mr. President, my very revered colleagues, in Nigeria, a multi-ethnic and diverse nation, the need to alternate power across the zones and governorship among the senatorial districts of the country cannot be overemphasized. This is because power rotation can be a veritable tool for our national integration, unity, inclusion, peace, and political stability. May I mention that for democracy to thrive anywhere, it must be adapted to suit the political reality of its environment. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, for the progress of our democracy, equity and equality should define its process. Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, time has come for us to reach certain peculiar compromises in respect to our political reality for the sake of our cohesion as a people. And one way to achieve this is through power rotation amongst all the geopolitical zones, governorship among the senatorial districts and federal constituencies of our country. Rotation of power is the strongest antidote against secessionist threats in this country. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, certain zones and regions felt marginalized and denied political power, and this has led to emotive violence and social unrest. The way forward to bring about political stability in the country, to give every section, zone or group a sense of belonging and inclusion is to embrace rotation of political power with open hands. May I humbly submit, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, that there is no section or zone in Nigeria that does not have the best person with the requisite competence, capacity, and character to lead at various political levels in Nigeria. Mr. President, my very respected colleagues, for the purpose of preserving our democracy, I urge you all to support the power rotation bill and pass it accordingly. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, for the avoidance of doubt, this bill is not intended for the 2023 general elections because by the time this bill runs its full circle, the 2023 general elections would have been concluded. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I remain Senator I.D. Gyang. I representing the blessed and very good people of Plateau North. Mr. President, I rise to support the reading of this very bill and its passage on second reading that has to do with the rotation, power rotation of elective offices in this nation. And I think the bill has been brought forward so that it can help us in the process of managing our diversity and plurality as a nation. Mr. President, as a multi-ethnic and multi-religious nation, managing and harnessing our diversity, to me, can be an asset rather than allowing it to be a liability. And of course, the effective management of our diversity is what this bill seeks to address in such a way that feelings and perceptions of marginalization at all levels, at state and federal levels, and even within constituencies, can be addressed by the passage of this bill. Of course, our political parties have within their constitutions tried to address this issue by adopting the principles of rotation to address this particular issue. But I think by bringing a statute to formalize it is something that I would want to reinforce so that ethnic minorities that are suffering the issues of this perception of marginalization can, on reliance of this very enactment, would forever be grateful to the 9th Assembly, the Senate, for bringing the issues of equity. Of course, we know that equity is not equality. But when fairness and issues of are addressed to ensure fairness, that is what this bill is advocating, and that is what I am supporting by this presentation. I therefore would want our colleagues that we support the enactment of this legislation that will be very, very historic in this nation and will be associated with the very good work of the 9th Assembly, and I therefore submit that we support this bill on its passage on second reading. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Balai Bunala.
Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, I am happy that I have been given opportunity to say a word or two in respect of this bill. I'm equally happy that the Senate President is a minority.
Thank you very much.
To amplify this issue, we all knew that the last president of this country, President Ibele Jonathan, was equally a minority. And we never had a bill of this nature for him to emerge as president. When the framers of our constitution decided to create the various offices under the constitution and gave us a federal constitution and made prescription as to the requirement of each office created by the constitution, it was
to further enhance the unity of this country. And Mr. President, you will remember that no matter how we try to allow our sentiments to drive our desire for a very united, equitable country, we equally have a responsibility to balance that with the oath of office we have taken as senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, i.e., to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And where the Constitution specifically has prescribed the requirement for emerging into each of the offices created by the Constitution, it may be very, very difficult for this Senate to, by way of legislation, upset that provision of the Constitution. The Constitution being the grand norm of our country, we are bound by it. This is really a beautiful, beautiful pursuit, but the framers of our Constitution appear to be wiser by taking the position that they took in the insertions of those provisions to enhance our desire to live as a united country. I can tell you, Mr. President, I will be the happiest person if this bill, for example, can go through the constitutional sieving to exist as a legislation in this country. But alas, I am tied by the oath of office I have taken as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And therefore, I'm really in difficulty to promote this bill on this floor. Mr. President, the additional debt...
So you are against it? Are you against it?
From. You see, sir,
You don't learn with your head.
the danger of including rotation of holding political offices in our law will do a great violence to our desire to live as a united country. And democracy being a recurrent suspicion whereby more than half the people are right more than half the time, must be given the benefit of choosing their leaders at each point in time. Just like we decided in this chamber to choose you knowing fully well you are a minority. So, let me respectfully say that, Mr. Senate President, not only me, this Senate cannot legislate on this matter without doing a great violence to our Constitution. Maybe this is the diplomatic way to put it. Thank you very much.
DSP.
Ovie Omo Agege Delta Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, let me begin by saying that on a good day, I ordinarily would align myself with the intent behind this bill. Ordinarily. But Mr. President, I'm taken aback. This is not a bill for constitutional amendment. It is not a bill to amend the Constitution. It is not. I think Senator Moro ought to know very well. As my brother and colleague alluded to earlier, the Constitution is very, very clear. To deprive somebody of the right to run for office through a provision of a piece of legislation enacted by the National Assembly which is contrary to the provision of the Constitution, will render that very Act of National Assembly null and void as it should be. Not too long ago, we had this exercise to amend the Constitution. I would have expected, this is a good bill. It's a very, very good bill. I would have expected Moro to bring this bill, and most of us would have gone for it. But while waiting for the next opportunity, Mr. President, at least until Senator Nara spoke, I was very, very curious that everybody who was speaking and contributing were from the other side, the PDP. And I found it very, very interesting. Interesting because we in APC, we believe in the intent behind this bill. That is why after, excuse me, let me speak, I'm on the floor. That is why, Mr. President, after 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari, all of the governors of southern Nigeria, they met in Asaba. Excuse me, I have the floor, and I have the protection of Mr. President. You know, they met, Mr. President, I'm sure I have the protection.
DSP, you are protected. Senator Betty Apiafi, stop harassing the DSP, please.
In Asaba, the Delta State, all the governors, our elected governors, people we elected to govern us in the entire southern Nigeria, they all met and took a position as enshrined pretty much in this lead debate. Mr. President, not only that, our governors in the north of APC extraction also took the position as enshrined. Excuse me, I have the floor.
DSP. DSP. Yeah, you have. Okay.
The mic, So all the governors in northern Nigeria of APC extraction aligned with the position of the governors of southern Nigeria, irrespective of political parties, and supported the content of this very bill. But, Mr. President, we now know what has happened. These people here, our colleagues on the other side, Mr. President, if they are serious, the first thing they need to do is to plead with their presidential candidate to step down from the race so that power after 8 years can come to southern Nigeria in line. Mr. President, I have the floor, Mr. President. I have the floor. You know, that is, Mr. President, we don't need to codify. Why waiting to codify this into law? Charity begins at home. Why waiting to codify this into law? Why don't we do what is right? Why don't we do what is needful? Having not had power for 8 years, power should come to the south. So they should tell their presidential candidate to step down from the race. Thank you, Mr. President.
Northwest. Mr. President, I've recent.
No, order what, please? Where? Which part of the Constitution? Side the Constitution. You have to. The Songwe Senator, okay, Jeff. You said point of order, I recognize you. And you know the procedure. No, you are not going to proceed. You are not going to proceed. You have to cite the section of the Constitution you are raising point of order. Okay, you may read. You should read it.
The National Assembly may, subject to the provisions of this Constitution, alter any of the provisions of this Constitution. Yes. That is what this bill seeks to do. And there's nothing that says it must be done at a particular time. So when everybody stands up and proceeds as if a constitutional amendment cannot be brought at this time, that's not fair. Or as if bringing this bill, it contradicts what is existing. You can amend any section of the Constitution at any time.
Do you want me to rule? Okay. The sponsor of this bill has not shown or referred to any section of the Constitution that he wants amended. He's looking for a law, not a constitutional amendment or alteration. And when our colleagues will say this will run contrary to the provision of the Constitution, they mean he is not asking for any constitutional amendment, and therefore this bill or the law he's seeking will run into serious and massive collision with provisions of the Constitution. And that's the issue our colleagues are raising. So I think we need to address it. It's not a generic thing that whenever you present a bill, it's changing the Constitution. No. You have to refer to the relevant sections that you want amended, and there's none here. But that is not to say that this debate will not go on. Senator Muhammad Adam Belkachwa is on his feet, and he will continue with the debate. So,
the Constitution itself came about through series of constitutional conferences after series of military regimes. And I had the privilege of being part of one of such constitutional conferences. And it was as a result of a decision during constitutional conference that political...
Senator Abamoro, you want the debate to stop or? Oh, okay. Point of order. Senator Abamoro.
I come under Order 42 on personal explanation to elucidate on the bill that I have proposed. Mr. President, listening to my colleagues and the explanations that they have given as to their opposition and support for this bill, I seek the indulgence of Mr. President and my colleagues to step down this bill and possibly represent it in the proper manner in subsequent sittings. Thank you, Mr. President.
Peace move. Even though you didn't discuss the terms of what you are going to say with me, but there is no harm accepting the point of order and seeking for stepping down of the bill. So I will still ask Senator Adam Belkachwa to round up now that the course of action has to be in a different way. Rather, Senator Adam Belkachwa, you may round up. There is no bill on.
Very much, Mr. President, and distinguished colleagues. I'm happy that all the other arguments that I had intended to present against this bill are now no more necessary. So I therefore express my gratitude to the mover of the bill for withdrawing it. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Moro, for coming out with that his bill and then withdrawing when he noticed that the bill needs further legislative action. But let me say this. The heterogeneous nature of our country or our people can hardly be resolved by just laws. Someone said, I'm a minority. Yes, I am. Today, by the grace of God and your endorsement, I'm the Senate President. This is to say that minorities can still get into positions that would ordinarily be seen to be for the majority. I think what we need to do is to be very conscious of each other's position and try to be fair and equitable. If we go along strictly by law, with over 450 ethnic groups and probably far more dialects, the situation may be endless, because if you go to one community and you say you are picking from the community, they will tell you this dialect is different from that, and so on and so forth. But we know what is right. We know what is right. So in addition of trying to make laws, we should also emphasize on doing the right thing, because this is what will stabilize us. Laws alone cannot. And of course, there are serious efforts in the Constitution to ensure that both majority and minorities get fair deal. And I think we can achieve that as much. I don't want to go into what the DSP has said. That's another side of the debate and argument. But I think we can do better, even with our constitution. Thank you very much. So, Senator Abomoro, you can do further consultations, and if you still feel strongly about this, you can bring back your reformed bill to the floor for debate. Leader of the Senate.